Hi, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point, Stories and Strategies from the World of Business. I'm your host, Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun. And joining me today is Ashif Mawji, venture partner at Rising Tide. Thanks so much for joining me today, Ashif.
Thanks for having me.
So I know, like you've been not only active in business, you've started a company, you've sold companies, but you also are incredibly busy or active in the community, which I also find really interesting. I'd like to dive into that, all the way up to your role as in venture capital right now. But before we kind of dive into that, I'd like to actually go back to how you got started in business. Where did that journey start?
The journey started back in Kenya. So I was born in Kenya, moved to Canada in '87. So, I think the first one was probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I found a market at school to sell into, and I did. And then, quickly that graduated. There would be, just like here, we have farmers markets. There we had something similar on the weekends. And I really loved watches, and I still do. So I found this one shop downtown in Kenya, in Nairobi, actually, that would loan me the watches on consignment on a Friday. And then on a Monday, I'd go back after school and give them back what I didn't sell, and whatever I sold, we would split the profits, right? So it was a very easy way with no capital. All I had to do is pay for the booth. And I made, a fair bit of money on the weekends. And that's how I fueled my other habits. I love playing the keyboard. I love computers, and in things like that in Kenya, you can get. And so if you did, you'd have to pay a premium for it. So I was able to buy those things through the money I made.
Oh, wow. And that's, it's interesting with, talking with entrepreneurs on this podcast, how many of them started doing something like that as a kid, found some little bit of, inspiration or a way to make money. And I find that so, fascinating. It feels like it's bred right into entrepreneurs somehow from birth.
Well, and I credit my parents because their message to me was, you can have anything in the world that you want. You just have to pay for it. Right. So it was like, okay.
I'm very familiar with that. In fact, my very first skateboard, I had to get a paper route so I could afford to buy a skateboard. So that was I think my first job as a kid was a paper route. And at some point I found that I actually was fairly good at sales and did a little bit of door-to-door sales, and that fueled whatever the next thing was, a bike or whatever I was buying at that point. So can you tell me a little bit about the journey of actually, moving to Canada? Like what brought you here, and how was that transition? How did you go from kind of moving here and then again, being able to, fuel that entrepreneurial dream?
Yeah, so again, in Kenya, I love computers, right? So I started programming, et cetera. So, at that age, I knew that computing would be in my future somehow. And life in Kenya was really good for us. When obviously we started, we had nothing. But my dad and mom worked really hard, and my dad ultimately was the managing director for Honda for Africa. So he had a really good position. We had good support from the corporation, from Honda. So there's really no reason to leave Kenya. But in '86, my dad's best friend got shot and killed. And he was at one of these markets. He was sitting in the car. Kenya, it's warm, so the windows were rolled down. His wife was shopping, and some random person came, and one of the car didn't ask for the car, just shot him, threw the body out, and took the car. Now, if he had asked for the car, he would have gotten the car. But it just showed that the value of life was so little. And that was what struck a chord. And so at that point, my parents said, look, whatever we have here, it's not worth our lives, right? And so now the good thing is, through his Honda connection, he had the connection with the ambassador for Canada, the ambassador for the UK, and the ambassador for the US. So all three countries had given us an open visa saying, you pick which you want and you're welcome to come there. So in '86 summer, we toured all three countries, summer being the operative word, and loved Alberta, right? Just loved Alberta. The vast openness, the friendly people, et cetera. And so we picked that, and we moved here in '87 February, and it was a day, similar to what we see today outside, but a lot cooler. It was minus 30, and lots of snow, and And so, yeah, and that was it. So culturally moving here, now when we moved here, we had nothing. So Kenya does not allow you to export any of your currency,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
Okay.
basically, yeah. So when we left, we actually gave away our house, gave away our cars, because there's no point charging for it. What are you going to do with the money? You
Yeah.
can't take it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so we just gave it away to friends. Came here with literally nothing, and so
Wow.
it was, yeah, it was like, talk about a reboot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we came here and went to school, and I just knew that, again, computing was going to be it for me. And so I started a couple other businesses, again, to support that, to go to school and so forth. Went to NAIT. Culturally, I mean, from a language standpoint, English is a primary language in Kenya because it was a British colony. So I didn't struggle from that standpoint. We were also ahead from an education standpoint. So I know when I came here in grade 10, what I'd done in Kenya was grade 12 here. So I was coasting in school,
Oh, wow.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. Which also led to my disruptive behavior. So I was very disruptive in class because I was bored, right?
Yeah.
But it allowed me to do other things. And yeah, so kind of
That
got
also,
acclimated, if you will. Yeah.
yeah, that also seems to be a bit of a trait amongst entrepreneurs. So disturbing things a little bit. That's just fascinating. I can't even imagine how, because it's the same stories a little bit from that I've heard about my grandpa. My great grandpa was lost in World War I, and they came over from Europe, and the story was that they were dropped off in the middle of a field in Saskatchewan. The train literally just stopped and dropped them off, and fortunately they had I think some family member that was sort of there, but that was it. Just, and I can't even imagine how was the, like, how did you even sort of just survive? Like, how did you come and get going and get into school, and everything changed? Like, everything must have been such a massive change. How did you see that as like, how do you guys overcome that? How did your family overcome that?
Yeah. So the reason we picked Alberta is my dad's brother and sister lived here.
Okay.
Right. So we had family support. Now, all three countries, we have family. So in the UK, we have family, in the US, and so forth. So there wasn't a question of that. And it was just, when we came here, my dad worked at a video rental, kind of like a Blockbuster type of thing. My mom has Montessori teaching in her background. So she worked at a Montessori school and taught. And, me and my brother went to school. Right. And so, we had enough, if you will, right? We had a roof, we had food, we had family. So to us, that was enough. And then, when I went to school, I worked at, I don't know if you'd remember, there was a restaurant called Bonanza.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like a buffet type of restaurant. So I
loved
started
it as a kid. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I started as a dishwasher and kind of, worked my way up to the prep cook. And then I worked at a fine dining place. And again, same kind of journey, dishwasher, worked myself up to a prep cook and did lawns and shoveling on the weekends. So just, found every which way to make money.
Yeah, yeah. So when you graduated high school, you went to NAIT, and you love computers. Was it already in your mind to head into the entrepreneurial route, or did that sort of come later?
No, it was, the good thing about me is that I know myself to a certain degree, and I know that I can't really work for anybody. Um, just my stubborn nature and my ADD and all that kind of stuff. I just knew I would never make a good employee. And so, graduating NAIT, I knew that, the rest of my colleagues all had great jobs. And I could have gotten a really good job, but I just knew I wouldn't be doing service to whoever employed me. Right.
Yeah.
Because I'd be very disruptive and things like that. And so I just knew that I needed to do my own thing. So I hustled, and the government, they probably still do today, but they'd have tenders come out every Tuesday. And so every Tuesday, at lunchtime from NAIT, I'd drive down to Public Works. It was on 142nd Street, go read through the tenders. There's no online, right? So you'd have to go there to actually read it. And I found this one that, I said, it's a stretch, but I think I can do it. And so I applied. And when I was interviewed, the manager told me, the manager's name was Steve, and he said, Ashif, he goes, look, you've barely qualified, like barely. I'd have to stretch quite a few things for you to qualify. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, but I'll tell you one thing, Steve, you don't know me, but I will get this job done way better than anybody else can. And so they awarded me the contract. And so when I got the contract, the work that needed to be done was very easy, but it was time consuming. So it was basically, I'd have to go, we had mainframe computers, right? So that it was, the department was Family and Social Services. So they had 9221s all around the province. And so you'd have to find a way to go to each station, download the stats onto a floppy disk, and then collate everything and produce a report for management every Friday. So this whole thing would take a week to do, right? So the first thing is, do you have to even travel, right? So I said, no, we don't have to travel. I can send instructions. So the clerk at that unit could run this utility and get all the stuff. But still, we did it for a few months. And I said, I think I can automate this. So I created a macro script, right? Basically, which grabbed screenshots. So it grabbed the screenshot. So I created a program that did all this stuff on the mainframe and then submitted all that stuff to me directly, right? So it was a lot of firsts at that time,
So how was it submitted to you at that? What year was this actually?
This was back in 92.
92. So this would be very early in sort of network world, or was there even a network? Like,
so you'd use modems, right? So we had the 14.4 and the 28.8 modems at that time.
I remember having
them. So basically, you'd still have to put it on a floppy disk. So, I'd have to train all the clerks to run the utility, and then the data would go on the floppy disk, and then they would have through an FTP transfer or something like that, get the data to me. So again, rather than mailing something in government mail, this was done electronically. And then once I got it, I had, a macro in Excel that would then take all these things. And so long story short, the process that used to take a week now took an hour. So I went back to my manager and I said, I've done this, and I expected him to be very happy. And instead, he was very mad. And I said, I don't understand, Steve. He says, Ashif, he goes, you've just worked yourself out of a job. This is what you were hired to do, right? Yeah. And I said, I understand. I go, but you're getting everything much quicker now. Management can get the reports on Monday instead of Friday. He goes, yes. He goes, they'll be very happy. I go, I tell you what, Steve. I said, I've done this for you. I want to go into real programming. I want to go in. So at that time, they were building the welfare system and stuff like that, right? Yeah. I said, I want to go do that work. And so he allowed me. He said, on one condition, he goes, whenever I need you, you come back to me, right? Quote unquote, I own you. Like, you come back. You don't go and disappear, right? And so I said, deal. And so that was kind of how I started. So I got into these other units, built different programs, and they all found that I was able to do things a lot more efficiently. And so I got more responsibility, to the point where I built really good relationships, especially with the chief financial officer. So when that department was getting outsourced, I had an in, if you will, right? And so I had, the major corporations, IBM, EDS, DMR, come to me because they had heard that if they get me on their team, they win the project, right? Because the reputation I built, right? Yeah. So long story short, we won a huge $60 million deal, which I had the vast majority of. So that was how I went from being a one person overnight to being, I think we had 150 team members the next day, kind of thing. Oh, right. Man. So so that was my first consulting company, if you will, built that.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess that this all led into Upside. I take it like this is sort of the foundation for that, or?
Yeah, I had 4 different companies before Upside. Upside was my first real product company. I had a product company before that. It was based on IVR, interactive voice response. I was actually one of the first in Canada, for sure, to do it. And again, it was something where, if you use a welfare example, folks would phone in, almost every day to find out, am I getting a check? How much am I getting a check? And there would be live agents answering the phones, providing the same information. So I again devised a utility where because they would always have to provide their, and I forget what it was, almost like a social identifier number, not a SIN number, but a different number. Okay. They had to identify that. They identified their date of birth. Okay. And if that matched, then they had 3 questions. What am I getting? When am I getting? How am I getting it? Yeah. So they would pick the option and get that. So that helped reduce, all that burden on live agents so they could go and do something else. And we were now able to do all that through the app. So that was my next company.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting that it's all, these aren't like, it's not really a programming problem. It's that you're identifying seemingly way ahead of everybody else these problems, and there's an, I'm sure from your point of view, an obvious solution that no one else has seen. It was that like, just how did you, I suppose that's just sort of your personality to be a problem solver, or how did you keep uncovering these over and over again?
Yeah. I think it's the mentality of, I believe everything's possible. So I especially thrive when somebody said this is impossible. So I'd be like, no, it's not impossible. It is possible. There's just somebody hasn't figured out how and when or why. So, like, again, back in the old days, I'd tear apart VCRs and computers and all that just to put them back together and see if I could do it better. Right. I failed most of the times, but, the odd time that I was successful, it worked. And so to me, it was always looking at a problem and saying, okay, this is the current way of solving it, but I know there's a better way. So let me find the better way.
Yeah. So now you talked about Upside is your first, or not your first, but your first sort of really big or successful product company. How did, what was the sort of inception of that? How did you get started there?
Yeah, so again, it was my consulting company, which I had going through all these other companies as well. So I've always had multiple companies at the same time. Right. So I had my consulting company, and, it was great, Blaine. Like it had, very good returns, like very good returns, better than Upside in terms of the early days. Right. But I was getting bored, which is, again, in my personality. If I do something for too long, I get bored. And one of the things was in Upside, or in my other company, we had a lot of contracts to manage. And I just found, I said, we're doing it in Excel and in Access and a bunch of other things. And I thought, it just doesn't make sense. Like there's got to be a better way. So I went around, asked a bunch of people, and I said, what do you do? And they're like, well, we use Excel. And so I found the same thing. And I said, do you like it? Do you like using Excel for this? No, but there's no other solution. And so that was when the light bulb went. I said, I think there is a better way. So we used these same people to give us ideas, saying, in a perfect world, what would you want? And so they gave us the requirement. So that was the blueprint. Yeah. So we went off and started building the product because I knew that I could use the product in my other company, right? And once we did that, I also then found that others could use it too. And that was the formation of Upside.
Yeah. And how was it self-funded, or were you raising money for that? Okay.
No, it was self-funded at the beginning. And then 2001 hit when the bubble burst, right? So it was like, there was no money, right? There's no capital. And I had gotten to the point, I didn't realize funding a product company would drain me, right? So I'd put all this money from other sources in there, and it was like, okay, every month you're burning more. The revenue isn't there yet, right? Because you still have to make your first big sale, right? And so I was at a point where I think I had maybe 2 months left of cash flow. Okay. Wow, yeah. And so I said, okay, well, I got to raise money. So that's when I raised. So it wasn't at the early beginning. It was about almost a year later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what other challenges did you find moving into like a product company? Like I basically did sort of a similar thing. I came from a service company. You hang your shingle up and you're profitable the day of, basically. Yeah. And honestly, we felt like we didn't, there's always challenges, but frankly, we didn't seem to hit a real challenge till around 2008 when the recession hit, which was such a fundamental shift for us. But when I started Dryrun and going into a product company, I think I thought I knew a lot more about product than I thought. And it's been a lot of learnings over the years. How did you make that transition to product? And what were some of the challenges you faced in that?
Yeah, it was again learning by being in the fire, basically, right? So I had minimal success on that other product company, but it wasn't really a real product. Like it was a product, but it wasn't, right? So I kind of thought I knew what I was doing, but then I realized that building a product, you need to satisfy hundreds and thousands of very different customers. So it's not a custom solution for one entity that you know all the needs of. It's going to be varying needs, and the solution's got to be adaptable, right? I misjudged the effort required in that, right? And so I thought, yeah, well, we built so many other products, for different clients. How hard can this be?
Yeah.
But building it on a scalable infrastructure, security, scaling, and the ability to allow the product to iterate and change without coding, right? So having parameters and configurations rather than custom code, because custom code, when you do an upgrade and you have, a million customizations, you're basically hooped, right?
Yeah.
So understanding all of that, it would have been great if I had mentors that I could have talked to that had been there and done that, but I didn't. And probably a failure on my part for not reaching out. And so, so we learned the hard way. And same with, cash flow. Like, if there was a solution like Dryrun at that time, I would have known that I was going to run out of money and be a lot more proactive. But, we weren't doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how were you, I'm curious how you managed, because this, like, running a product company is taxing, and looking at when you have to raise funds and manage that team and talk with customers and know where you're going. And then you had other companies at the same time. How did you, sort of manage to switch and change those hats and keep everything moving forward with multiple companies, and I'm assuming multiple teams?
Hmm. Yeah, no, time management is key. And so, I very quickly learned that if I do everything the same way, I'm not going to be able to do it. Right. So I needed to prioritize and delegate. And as an entrepreneur, for me, especially, it's very tough to delegate because I'm a control freak. I like to control my destiny, and I always think I can do a better job. Right. And so learning to let go and understand that actually there are others that can do a way better job than you was something that took a while for me to, for that light bulb to go on. But I also devised a method to quickly address things. If I get an email, I put it into buckets very quickly in my mind. Is this a 1 to 2 minute response? Is this a 2 to 10 minute response? Or is this a hour plus response? And the 1 to 2 minute responses I would do right away, right? So I'd clear my inbox of all those things. It was, yes, no, sounds good, go ahead, whatever, right? Same thing with the 2 to 10 minute. I'd spend a little bit more time. So I'd kind of address those. The ones that were going to take longer, I'd respond right away saying, look, I got it. I'm going to respond to it. I need a day or two, or whatever the time was, right? So that other party knew that I had got it and I'm going to think about it, right? So they weren't left in limbo. And so when I used that approach, I was able to do so much more.
Yeah. That's a good tactic, actually, a really good tip, because that's something that I think we all are challenged in, is our inbox, and now with multiple avenues of text message, Slack, and
Right.
everything else. There's so much going on all the time, and it's like a triage of information all the time. So with Upside, can you sort of lay out the path a little bit of where did you move from like building this thing to where you actually had the success and you were actually able to exit?
Yeah. So, to me, quality was really important. Our competitors, now at that point, we had competitors and they were really well funded. One of them was in the Valley and they had just raised 75 million US. Okay. So they were the behemoth in the industry.
Yeah.
They had all the A players, like, the A players in marketing and finance, sales, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but they focused a lot on sales and marketing, right? We, right or wrong, focused on quality and the product. I said the product has to be something that, people would look at it and go, yeah, we need this, and it works, right? And it's never going to be perfect. So, I had to balance with my CIO, who wanted the perfect product, right? Zero bugs and all. I said, look, that's never going to happen, because if we do strive for that, we're going to be out of money and no customers. So 80%, 80-20 rule, right? 80% of it works, good enough for me. Keep it at that. And so we focused on the products. So to the point where Hewlett Packard had issued an RFP, a request for proposal. And we got it because we were in the marketplace. So we always got these RFPs. We wouldn't be the front runner, if you will. This company that I mentioned in the Valley had connections at the CEO level. Their CEO knew the CEO of HP. So this proposal, if you will, was kind of crafted for them. Okay, right? We were bidding just so procurement could check a box saying we invited a bunch of people, they went through and so forth.
Or whatever it is.
Right? Yeah. And so, but when the HP team went through our product, they were just shocked. They were like, wow, it does all of this and it actually works. So then they took it out for a test run. Then they came here to Edmonton again in the winter. These are people from Palo Alto coming here. And I remember one of the fellows, his name is Luis. He's a Spaniard, right? And so warm-blooded, if you will, comes in here, and I go and pick him up from the Delta downtown. And it was unfortunately another minus 30 day. And he goes, and he used the F word. He goes, "This is effing cold." He goes, "I've never been this cold." He goes, "How do people live here?" Anyway, took him to the office, and our office was bare, right? It was some chairs work, some didn't. You had to be careful which one you sat on because it might lean and fall. So I had to make sure they sat on the right chairs, right? And we sat on the wrong chairs. And after they saw that, I thought, I wonder if they're going to get a bad, like think badly about us, right? And he says, Ashif, he goes, coming from the Valley, we see all the companies that went under during the bubble because they wasted their money on furniture and this, all the vanity stuff, as he called it. He says, you guys are focused on the product. He goes, and your product works. So he goes, and then he kind of told me, he says, look, he goes, I'm sure you figured you weren't the front runner. But he goes, now you are. He goes, your product is it. Your team is amazing. Okay. So he told me at that point, he says, we're going to go into negotiation with you. And then he also told me, he says, Ashif, he goes, don't reduce your price. Your price is good. Okay. So don't, because HP is going to be a very difficult customer. Okay. We're going to want everything. So make sure you factor that in. So he helped me a lot in this, right? Because I would have done the counter. Like I would have dropped our price. Like I would have done a bunch of stuff, right? To get that first deal. And so he actually coached me really well. So I always grateful for that. And then the team just stepped up and delivered, and HP was super, super happy to the point where they started selling our software for us. They would speak at conferences. They would go on their own dime, and they were so proud of this product. They would brag about it. And because of their name, right, other companies would go off. HP is bragging about this. They don't even own the product. Like they're not a distributor, if you will. And they're still talking about it. Then it must be good. So that's how we got, a lot of traction.
Yeah, no, that's it reminds me of those days of negotiating. Like we did a lot of government work in my last business, and it reminds me of as sort of mechanical as RFPs are, and as much as they look like you've got your front runner, you've got this, and you need those 3 bids and everything. It still comes back to I think how important relationships are. And being able to work with people and understand their needs, and that's where the fortunately the best product wins then, right? Mm-hmm. Or sometimes wins, not always, but right. Best product wins. But so much of it is getting those champions and those people that really believe in you, and will share that valuable insight that helps pull it all together. I just find that really really interesting. So of course you're gaining traction. You basically have this massive international company as a champion for you. How did that lead into an eventual exit?
Yeah. So, with HP, so prior to that, we had a customer called Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway, BNSF. They were at that point, I don't know if they are now, they might be the largest, but they were the second largest railroad in North America. Okay. But railroad means old, right? Old technology, old. Yeah. But they had a champion, Leanne Vernon was her name, a Texan, who was just gung-ho about technology, and she wanted to be different, right? So again, they did an RFP. There was no front runner. It wasn't put for anybody. But again, they did the same due diligence, right? And they found our product to be the best. So they came to Edmonton. Now that was in the summer, so it was much better. We're able to have an outdoor barbecue and all that kind of stuff. We really treated them well. We showed them the Albertan hospitality, and they really loved everything, right? And they loved the fact, again, that we don't spend money on, on the vanity stuff, right? So they became another champion. So with BNSF now and HP as two different industries, but respected leaders, championing this, speaking at different conferences, supply chain conferences, et cetera, the word was spreading. So now Gartner, Forrester, which are the analysts in this field, got wind of us. So they did their reports, right? They do their annual Magic Quadrants and all that kind of stuff. And we were now ranking top right? Leadership category. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, any company in the world that would issue an RFP or would be interested in this type of software would automatically see us and would be invited to the table. And we knew that once we were invited to the table, it's going to be very, very hard for us to lose, because we had a really good product, a really good team, and a team that could execute, right? Our talent, and I thank Edmonton and Alberta for that, because I believe the people we have here are arguably the best in the world, okay? The loyalty, the talent, the desire to work hard, et cetera, et cetera. So we had all these key ingredients. And now, if I fast forward back to, let's say, around 2009, 10, we started getting acquisition offers, okay? But I also knew, so when I started the company, I always have a roadmap and a timeline and a plan. And I said, I'm going to do something in 2012. That's the year I turned 40. So either I'm going to exit from management and let somebody else run it, kind of be like an executive chair or whatever, and go do something else, because my time would have come on this project. I'd be bored at that point, right? I'd had no other milestone to check, but I had other milestones. I wanted to be number one, independently ranked by Gartner, AMR, and Forrester, which is something that no other company had ever done. Okay, they were number one in one of them, but not in the other. But I wanted all of them. And so that was my last checkpoint. And we hit that in 2011. Nice. Right. So these companies that wanted to acquire us, we had kept them, and I would keep them up to date every quarter, right? Just saying, look, we're not ready yet. We'll be interested at a certain point. Don't know when, but here's where we're at right now. And so they followed us. And so in 2011, we started the process. I got a banker involved and went through a process, and we gave the banker the names of the companies that were interested. And then they basically helped get the best offer.
Okay. Yeah. How long was that process, and how taxing was it to sell?
It surprisingly wasn't that long, because these companies had already known about us, right? For the most part. I mean, the banker brought others to the table that hadn't known about us, but we were fortunate to win Canada's best managed companies, right? Multiple years in a row. Going through that process, you learn how to keep everything organized, all your processes, your books, your, everything, right? Yeah. And so when it came to the due diligence and the discovery process, we had everything done. It was all ready. And we had gone through so many audits, right? With the, because we worked with defense and stuff like that. So we had a lot of audits done by, foreign governments and so forth, healthcare related audits, HIPAA audits. So because we were in every sector, we were in 180 countries in every industry. Okay. So you name the company, Nike, whoever, Google, they were all our customers, right? And so we had security, we had all this data organized. And so when it came through that process, everything was there. So we were able to go through all that in roughly 6 months or less, everything, start to end.
Did you stay with the acquiring company, or were you just able to walk away?
No. So again, back to my first thing, I can't work for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
That sounds like a gift.
Yeah. So when the first negotiation started, they wanted me on for 2 years. Okay. And I knew in the back of my head, thinking that's not going to happen, but I didn't say no. I said yes. I said, okay, we'll talk about it. I go, put it in for now. So it was in the contract. Right. And then each time they wanted something, I cut that back. Right. And so I said, okay, well, let's make my term a year. And at first, the CEO of the other company is like, all right, okay, whatever, And then the final, where the deal almost fell apart is I said, well, make it 3 months. And he called me up and he just was yelling and swearing at me, right? He goes, I don't understand. He goes, we're paying you handsomely. We're doing all this stuff. Why don't you want to work for me? Blah, blah, blah. And he got into all this stuff. And I said, I let him vent. And then I said to him, I said, look, I know myself. I can't work for anybody. It's not you. I just can't work for anybody. Right. And he says, well, the deal's off. He goes, you were part of the deal. Deal's off. Oh, fine. Then the banker phones me. He's like, what did you do? He goes, the deal's off. I go, I can't work for him. He goes, well, you should have said that early on. I said, well, yeah, it is what it is. So I said, just they'll come back. They need us. I said, they'll come back. So I said, work on the other ones. Because we had 4 shortlisted. I go, work on the other 3. And, if we don't do a deal with these guys, don't worry about it. One of the other ones will do it. So they start working on the other 3. And now 2 weeks later, this guy, the CEO, phoned me and I saw his on the call display. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't return his call for 2 weeks. So I let him stew on it, right? And then finally he comes back. He goes, okay. He goes, done. I go, I've changed my mind. I go, not 3 months. I go, not even 1 day. Right? So the day we signed the papers,
yeah,
I'm done. It was fine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what that was like the next morning, the first day you wake up and it's like, I'm done. And especially with something that was such a final, there was no transition. How did that sort of feel and suit you?
Yeah. So it was, I'd prepared my mind for that, right? So I was ready for it. It was something that I planned a long time ago. I've talked to a lot of people. I'm in a group called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. It's global leaders around the world. And so, I was able to talk to a few of them that had gone through exit, saying, how do you prepare yourself? So I'd learned a lot. The toughest thing was the day I had to say goodbye to my team, right? So I did it by pods, I did it by team. And I thought that whole process could be done in about 2 hours. It took the whole day because I found between each group, I'd have to come back to my office, close the door, cry my eyes out, and then go to the next group, right? Because it was just so emotional, right? So go and do that with each group. But that was the final point where I kind of said, okay, I'm done, right? And so it was kind of off, and then I actually went to California. So I exited a week before the final transition happened. So it wasn't even the day off, and so my lawyers were like, this is not normal. You need to be here for the, quote unquote key exchange. I go, no. I go, you guys are here. It's just paperwork anyways. I go, I'm going to California. If you need me, I'll be able to plane. I'll be able to come back right away.
Yeah. That's the most unique transition I've heard. And it's, but it sounds like, when I've talked to so many other founders that have exited, staying on is often the struggle, and the longer it goes, it seems like rarely do they make, if it's 3 years, they just don't make it. If it's 2 years, they might, I just find that really interesting. So you, now you've sold this, I'm assuming, did you still have other companies at that time, or were you basically like,
no, not at that time. Yeah. I'd exited from all the other companies at that time.
Yeah. So what was up next for you at that point? Where was your interest at?
So I knew that I needed to do something for the community, right? And so again, working with the different not-for-profits, I kind of saw that sector needing a lot of help. And I thought, let me spend some time there. What can I do there? Right. So I knew that was going to be my next thing, but I also had heard from other people that had exited saying, don't rush into anything. Take some time, think about it, go on a holiday, etc. Now, my mind isn't, and still today isn't tuned to really take, a true holiday. Like every day I got to do something relating to work. Right. So, but I did take a little bit of time to kind of digest and stuff. And so I knew that I needed to do something for the community. I just didn't know what it was at that point.
Yeah. And so because I've looked at your kind of your CV, and it's incredibly long with all the things you've done in the community. And what are some of the highlights? What are some of the things that you found, maybe most challenging, but also the most, gratifying with that?
Every role I've played, whether it's a director at the Stollery or the University Hospital Foundation or the ballet, every single one has given me something new that I've learned, and appreciate that industry, and figure out, how I can help that industry. So, um, nothing that I would say is challenging in the sense that it can't be solved,
Yeah.
but just more inspiration to say, yeah, there are things that I can do. My current ones, I chair the Edmonton Police Foundation.
Okay.
So we've done something that's a first in the world. We've created a community solutions accelerator, right? So this is now, police, we can't allow the police to fail ever, just like healthcare, just like education, right? There's certain things, and government, they can't fail. They're not allowed to fail. But
Mhm.
as you know, in innovation, if you don't allow yourself to fail, you can't get better.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you bridge the two? So we created this accelerator, which isn't part of the police, but it can manage things that work with the police, whether
Mm.
it's data, et cetera. And you can do it in an isolated area where you are allowed to fail, right? And so we've done that, and we've done 3 challenges so far, and all have had amazing results, right? Things that in isolation the police couldn't do, or another unit couldn't do.
Yeah.
But in the accelerator we can do, because we're allowed to fail. And so we're working with government, we're working with different groups. That is fun. That's a lot of excitement, and we're going to be doing some really cool things around homelessness and addictions coming up,
Yeah.
which I'm really excited about.
Oh, that's really interesting. And yeah, I've never heard of an approach, anything like that before. But it does make sense. And it's bringing that expertise from a innovation industry to a pretty old school sort of industries, pretty amazing. What else are you doing today? Like what are I'm sure you've got a lot of hats on again. What all are you in today?
Yeah, so on the work side, on the investment front, it's been busy. 2020 and now 2021, I've never seen it this busy for investment. Like, we've done more deals now than if I look at the last 5 years. Um,
Wow.
and it's just innovation again. I think crisis spurs a lot of innovation, right? And
Mhm.
so when you're forced in a pandemic situation, you're going to be very creative and innovative. And so we've seen that. And so we've been
Mhm.
investing heavily. At the same time, I've also had the most exits I've ever had, right?
Yeah.
So, which is strange, because I wouldn't have, if you told me in March, to predict the rest of 2020 in terms of exits, I would say zero,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And, I've had 9, and the 10th one just happened. So 10
Oh, wow.
exits, right? Which is crazy. Yeah,
That's amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
I had no idea actually that was the activity that was going on there. Like, our 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 ear to the ground is always with small business, with the CPA community, the very operational. Even though we're in the innovation space, that's where we are. But we don't,
right.
we're right on the ground floor of this operational uh, business area. And so it's interesting. I didn't realize, especially that the acquisitions, like, there'd be that kind of activity going on. That's
Yeah.
really interesting that what crisis does, and especially because it's not like we've come out of the other side yet. We're right in the middle of this
Right.
thing, and
Yeah.
it's happening. Yeah.
There was a lot of, I'd made some investments early on in companies like Lemonade and Snowflake, and they've all gone IPO, and done, if you ask me, the valuations are like crazy, right? Like, it's just never in my wildest dreams would have thought that company would be worth this much ever. Um, but it's the marketplace. That's just, I don't know if it's a bubble or not. To me, it just seems unreal, the valuations, but these companies are providing value. I mean, you look at Tesla, it blows my mind as to how much that company is valued at. Like, it makes no sense, over 300 some P/E ratio. Like, it just makes no sense, but there's a market, there's an appetite for it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that's an interesting one. It just I'm surprising how But they're leading. They've sort of, in a way, they've created an industry. It's almost like when the iPhone came out, they created the industry, but all the competitors are just about to flood the market. And I'm curious to see how that all plays out. It'll be fun to sit back and watch a little bit anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really terrific conversation. How can people get in touch with you if they'd like to get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best. So just, search my name. You'll probably only find one in there, Ashif Mawji in LinkedIn, and just connect through there. That's primarily the best way. And then, once you communicate on there, we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, terrific. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. This was an absolutely just a great conversation. There's so much I learned too that I just I found really interesting about your background. That when I'm reading about you and that, it's a little different, well, a lot different from actually hearing on that ground floor and the challenges and everything. And I think people will really enjoy listening to that. So thank you so much. And again, everybody, I'm Blaine with Dryrun. If you're looking for some help managing your cash flow, monitoring it, understanding what's happening in your business, and making better decisions on where you're headed, please look us up at dryrun.com. We'd love to help you. Thanks again.
Thank you.